Let's talk about how to get inflation under control and increase growth and prosperity in America all in one shot. Yes, it can be done. And my good friend Art Laffer is here to tell us how. Art is a former Reagan economist. He's Presidential Medal of Freedom recipient. And if all that wasn't enough, he's author of Taxes Have Consequences, a great new book about all of this. And Art, my only problem with your book is it should have a subtitle: Taxes Have Consequences and Incentives Matter. Those two things, you put those two things together and you can change the world, no?
Yes, of course you can. In fact, it does have a subtitle, which is the Income Tax History of the U.S. from 1913 to the present, which is a very carefully done period there. And by the way, there are a lot of lessons to be learned, some of which we're experiencing right now, but some of which we put pretty much to the past as well. But I was going to start off with gobble gobble with you, but that turkey did look good.
But I love it. I took the words out of your mouth talking to our reporter there. But I got to say, yes, once you were plugged in to the notion, to the creative notion of incentives and what they can do and how they can be far more powerful than any economist with all their diagrams and charts and numbers can even imagine. I mean, it really, it makes you a positive person. I think that's one reason why Ronald Reagan was such a positive person. He understood that internally, the power of incentives, and put it into practice.
Yeah, well, once you know what happens, and once you know the principles, once you know how the economy reacts, it's no longer this magical, distant, confusing thing. You really know how to play the instrument and make things happen. For example, we do have some good ideas about inflation. Inflation is, as you guys say all the time, too much money chasing too few goods. Now, the money in this case is the balance sheet of the Fed. By holding interest rates down for so long, they had to do that by buying all these bonds, which increased the balance sheet of the Fed very much and really reignited the inflation in the U.S. that we now have. The other side of it is too much money chasing too few goods, and production of goods is based upon incentives. And those incentives are your after-tax wage, after-tax, notice how I said that, and that means it relies on taxes very much. If you lower taxes, you can increase the supply of goods dramatically. But it also depends upon the income effect of government spending, which if you give people all this money, they will have enough money to not want to work. I mean, they're going to, some of their jobs are unpleasant. They don't like them. So if they give them all that money, they're going to take time off. Other ones will have a lot of money there. They're going to shout their friends a beer. They're going to take a trip to somewhere and not work. So the income effect and the substitution effect of taxes and spending is what causes our supply of goods to be down. The quantity, the monetary base, or the balance sheet of the Fed, it takes it too much money. And that's why we had the inflation. Now, right now, David, we're in a little bit of a lull. But I'm not sure that lull is going to last. But right now, we should be very grateful for the little bit of a lull in inflation. Prices are still high. They're still rising too fast, but not nearly as fast as they were rising, let's say, 4, 5, 6 months ago. Let's
drill down a little more in the second part of that equation, the increase of supply, because another problem that we have, and it's directly related to what you say, incentivizing people not to work, is that productivity has come down dramatically. I mean, we're down, I think it was down 4%, which we haven't had a drop like that since 1940s. So it's a huge drop. And when production is down, that is how much each individual produces. When each individual produces less, that means you have fewer goods. And as you were saying, that's part of the equation. That means higher inflation. I was talking to Fred Smith, the founder of FedEx. He said the biggest problem that they are facing right now is the non-productivity of the workforce. They don't have those personal incentives to work as hard as they used to, and it's creating a lot of problems for big companies that employ hundreds of thousands of people like FedEx. How do you solve that problem? How do you get incentives back into the workforce?
Well, you know, it's very easy. You can't have people work remotely. They don't see anything there. You can't judge as to what their productivity is. And, you know, and it's especially true when you realize that a lot of workers who don't do very much are people who don't respond to incentives, like professors. I mean, there's really not much variation in salaries amongst there, and there's no measure of output for a professor there. So you really don't have incentive. Politicians all have fixed pay. They're all guaranteed their jobs. They've got tenure forever. So there are a lot of jobs that don't use incentives. So it's just a small area that really lives on incentives. And that small area is what really drives the productivity. And when people are working remotely, they aren't nearly as productive as they are when they come back. And I'm hoping Elon Musk is leading the way to a big change in the U.S. and bringing them back into the office.
Yep.
And then you'll see productivity increase dramatically.
I would add Jamie Dimon to that. I mean, he seems to get it too, and there are other individuals. And again, as I mentioned, Fred Smith, FedEx is going to be working very hard on that. I think the answer will come from the private sector as far as that comes. But the answer with regard to the tax incentives and regulatory, that has to come from the fiscal side. It ain't going to happen with a Biden administration. Maybe the Republican Congress can fiddle around the edges, but that alone, a Republican Congress alone, isn't going to be able to fix the tax and regulatory incentives that we need, is it?
Yeah. No, and my real problem, if you can I vent a minute with you, David?
Vent.
My real problem is all these Republicans are going after investigations and doing all this other nonsense. We should be the stewards of the economy. Yes. We should be the guardians of prosperity. Fred Smith really does understand this stuff. And when these guys go off spinning around and doing all this nasty, hostile stuff, that's not the way to win. No one cares about Hunter Biden, to be honest with you. They care about growth in the economy. New housing starts up, not down to a 2-year low. They care about all of this stuff that matters. We need to be the stewards of the economy, controlling inflation, lower taxes, spending restraint, minimal regulations and free trade, and the guardians of prosperity. And then we'll get elected massively 2 years from now, and then we'll be able to put in that president. There's nothing wrong with having green eye shades and knowing how to get the trains to run on time.
By the way, can I throw another thing in there?
It's wonderful.
And knowing how to keep our health system safe. You know, there was a lot of misinformation during the election about how Republicans wanted to dismantle Medicare. Well, in fact, it's the so-called Anti-Inflation Act of the president that has some measures that are stripping out of Medicare all of the very few private sector incentives that still exist there, like Medicare Advantage and other things that they are crippling. I spent a month in a socialized medical system. My wife had a stroke in London. We were stuck there for a month. It was horrible. It was disgusting. They don't have enough stuff. The people were very nice. I got to give the people credit, but the system is broken. We don't want that here, but Democrats do.
Well, let me just say, this is where Trump was great and Biden's great. Both of them are great on price transparency, medical health transparency. That would reduce the cost dramatically. It would increase life expectancy much. If you look at in the last 70 years, we've dropped relative to the OECD in life expectancy by some 5 years. Yeah. And we've increased our costs something like way up.
I know.
So we're spending a lot more and getting a lot less,
and spending more.
And no one knows what prices or qualities are.
Right.
Your doctor has not a clue, nor did the British, by the way, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, the British no less. When you have completely socialized medicine, you totally have lost track with how much things cost. And again, things fall apart. Their system doesn't work. God help anybody who's stuck in a British healthcare system like my wife and I were for a month. When we walked into the hospital in New York Presbyterian, because she had to stay there for a month afterwards, we were crying because it didn't smell. It wasn't dirty. It wasn't filthy. They had stuff to help us with. It's just we don't want to go down that route. That way is dangerous. But let's leave on a positive note. We can turn things around.
Yeah. How's she doing? Is she doing well?
She's doing great. Thank God. She's got the right attitude, and that's 90%.
Great. That's the positive note.
That's a positive note. But the main thing is we can have both lower inflation and increase prosperity at the same time. They go together. That's the great news of this whole story.
But tell the Republicans, David, to concentrate on being the protectors of prosperity,
we've got one
the
coming
stewards of growth.
All right. The next segment, we got one of them. We'll tell him that to his face. Art Laffer,
Please.
Good to see you, my friend. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Gobble, gobble. Thanks very much for being here.
Gobble, gobble back at you.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.